This is the ending to The Walking Dead, a click-and-point adventure game that takes place in the comic universe of The Walking Dead. This game advertises that certain choices within the game will affect it. Now, notice that I said in the beginning, this is the ending of The Walking Dead. I was implying that this is the single ending to The Walking Dead. Lee ends up dead and Clementine ends up alone no matter what happens. Doesn't matter if you save certain people, his fate is sealed. But what if it wasn't? You see, ever since I played The Walking Dead back in 2014, I've always had a problem with the ending and how linear it actually was. In fact, let's look back at the entire game. You start the game off in a police car. You play as Lee Everett, a convicted killer by the powers that be. You're talking with the police officer about your case and he remarks about your wife. In response, you're given 4 choices on what you can say to him. And no matter what choice you make, you get the same answer. I think that it should have been the first red flag that something was wrong. The game deliberately gave you a choice and fails to deliver on it, and that moment will be a staple in some of the events that go down in the game. There are many events in Season 1 that even if you choose them, it'll land you in the same spot. That aspect really irked me since I felt that The Walking Dead Season 1 could have been much more, not only in the storytelling aspect, but in the gameplay aspect as well. This was originally going to be an analysis on Season 1, but I realized that's just kind of boring. So instead, I wanted to create my own imaginary version of the game that actually makes your choices matter in a heavy way. Not only with choices, but with how you act and who you side with. This is going to be my version of Telltale's. Now, let's look at the perspective of my version. You start the game off in a police car. You play as Lee Everett, a convicted killer by the powers that be. You're talking with the police officer about your case and he makes a remark about your spouse. In response, you're given 4 choices on what you can say to him. This time, the things that you choose to say in the game can make an impression on the officer. Depending on what you say, you could either make the officer angry, sympathetic, or neutral to your problem. Depending on what you said, you could go more into the subject at hand and really explore what Lee is actually thinking in that moment and get a picture as to what the police officer actually believes in him. Until the car crash happens and you're tossed into a world that you have to survive in. So after killing the zombie cop and escaping some zombies, you get to Clementine's house, and you finally learn what has happened with her parents.
Clementine, baby. If you can hear this, call the police. That's 911. We love you. We love you. We love you.
Now, from this standpoint, we get the impression that this was a normal family before the tragedy struck. But this is where the gameplay aspect comes in, and it's actually tailored to how you actually play. Instead of going straight into the story, we can have some time to explore some of the houses in the actual game. No longer are we restricted to one path, but instead we can walk around and truly see how the apocalypse has affected society. After walking around a bit, you find a walkie-talkie and you come in contact with Clementine.
Where are you?
I'm outside in my treehouse. They can't get in.
That's smart.
See? Can you see me? I can see you through the window.
Clementine in this game is one of the anchors for your choices. She will reflect how you actually are in the game, making it almost sort of like a mirror or a reminder of what you do. Similar to how the original game had it, but a little bit more in depth. Around this point, you come across Chet or the police officer depending on if you leave right away or at night. I honestly don't have a problem with this sequence, so I decided to keep it in my version of the game. We arrive at Herschel's farm where we talk to him and lie to him and blah blah blah. The thing about this part of the game is that this choice doesn't really matter, because this takes place in the comic universe and Herschel actually meets up with Rick's group in the comics. So no matter what we do, we have to keep moving on. So you, Clem, Kenny, Kat, and Duck are heading out to Macon where you meet up with Lily and her group. There's nothing particularly wrong with this pharmacy chapter except for the dialogue. It would have been a lot more impactful if you could learn a little bit more about these people's stories. Maybe go into what happened on the first days, where they were there any safe zones or anything like that. But one thing I would have changed is Larry and Kenny. You know how you get to choose whether or not you go against Kenny and his family? Well, in our game, his relationship with you actually matters. The more you agree with Larry, the more he likes you, and the more Kenny starts to hate you, and vice versa. This adds more depth later on in the game as to who takes your side in arguments and overall helped you out. So let's say during the escape from the pharmacy, you sided with Larry all along. Kenny will close the door and lock it. With only a few seconds from death, Larry is the one who saves you. This adds more dimensions to the game and choices. This is what Telltale's game was missing. The choice to choose who you want to be friendly with and how that impacts you. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a like, and if you like any more of my content, subscribe.